For decades, fans envisioned the Starship Enterprise's voyages as tales of unity, bravery, and friendship. Yet, beneath the polished surface of each episode, deep tensions simmered, powerful egos clashed, and tempers often drove the cast to their breaking point. William Shatner, the actor who vividly brought Captain Kirk to life, found himself at the epicenter of both the show's monumental success and its behind-the-scenes turmoil. Now, in his advanced years, he speaks with remarkable candor about those turbulent days, revealing a reality starkly different from the heroic narratives that captivated global audiences. A childhood shaped by dramatic events. William Shatner's life commenced in Montreal, Canada on March 22, 1931, amidst an unprecedented blizzard. His mother was compelled to give birth at home due to impassable roads. From its very inception, his life story exuded an air of unpredictability and high drama, almost as if destiny itself was orchestrating his future path toward the stage. By his 8th birthday, Shatner was already enrolled in a children's acting workshop, guided by a revered Canadian actress. At the tender age of 10, he was performing professionally in radio dramas, including The Magic Flute for CBC. Soon thereafter, he garnered critical acclaim for his portrayal of Tom Sawyer in a local theatrical production, where critics lauded his commanding stage presence. Despite his prodigious early talent, Shatner's academic journey proved challenging. At McGill University in 1948, he pursued economics, a pragmatic choice intended to appease his parents, but he never truly found his place in academic lecture halls. He confessed years later that he seldom attended classes, discovering his true passion within the campus theater scene. By 1950, he had not only penned but also starred in a student play that achieved such widespread popularity it captured the attention of CBC producers. This marked his inaugural television appearance, offering a preliminary glimpse into the expansive screen career that lay ahead. In 1956, Shatner embarked on his most significant professional gamble yet, relocating to New York City to pursue acting as a full-time profession. His Broadway debut arrived with Tamburlaine the Great, a production that ran for a mere 20 performances. Although the show itself did not succeed, the experience proved transformative. A young Canadian, entirely without formal training, had successfully reached the esteemed New York stage. From that point, Shatner diligently began constructing a formidable resume on American television throughout the late 1950s and early 1960s. He secured roles in iconic series such as Alfred Hitchcock Presents, The Defenders, and The Outer Limits. However, it was his two pivotal appearances on The Twilight Zone, particularly the chilling 1963 episode Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, that truly showcased his exceptional ability to portray characters on the verge of mental collapse under extreme duress. This unique talent for conveying intense psychological pressure and barely contained panic would subsequently become a defining characteristic of his most celebrated role, his transformation into Captain Kirk. By 1965, William Shatner maintained a consistent workload in television, yet nothing at that time presaged his imminent casting in the role that would undeniably shape the trajectory of his entire life. At this juncture, Star Trek already had an established captain, Jeffrey Hunter, who had portrayed Christopher Pike in the original pilot episode famously titled The Cage. NBC executives, however, ultimately rejected this pilot, citing its pace as too slow and its concepts as overly cerebral. Instead of completely abandoning the promising idea, they made an unconventional decision. They commissioned a second pilot. Hunter, for his part, chose not to reprise his role, reportedly to concentrate on feature films, though Shatner later insinuated that deeper disagreements might have motivated his departure. With the captain's role unexpectedly vacant, producers turned their attention to Shatner. He was presented with the rejected pilot, and while he acknowledged the impressive production values, he felt the performances were excessively rigid. He firmly believed that the captain character required a more relatable and light-hearted touch. When Shatner assumed the mantle of James T.T. Kirk in 1966, he fundamentally reimagined the character as simultaneously commanding and remarkably approachable. He envisioned Kirk as inherently curious about the uncharted, genuinely enthusiastic about cosmic exploration, yet sufficiently relaxed to exchange jokes and banter with his loyal crew. Rather than issuing stern, rigid commands, Kirk might casually lean toward a helmsman and offhandedly suggest, "Take us left, George." This inherent sense of ease and informality distinguished him sharply from the archetypal, often rigid military figures prevalent on television screens during that era. To meticulously sculpt Kirk's multifaceted personality, Shatner drew inspiration from two distinct sources. One was Horatio Hornblower, the revered naval hero celebrated for his keen intellect and unwavering bravery. The other was Alexander the Great, a formidable historical figure Shatner himself had embodied in a failed 1963 television pilot. He infused Kirk with Alexander's compelling blend of innate charisma and decisive authority. The crucial addition of humor, a characteristic Shatner steadfastly insisted upon, further softened the character's edges. Unlike numerous science fiction protagonists, Kirk was not merely a cold, calculating strategist. He was an individual with whom viewers could genuinely laugh and implicitly trust. The calculated gamble paid off handsomely. When Star Trek officially premiered in September 1966, Kirk rapidly emerged as a standout character. He embodied a powerful sense of courage and unyielding optimism during an exceptionally turbulent decade, and audiences profoundly connected with his unwavering confidence. Yet, even as the show steadily garnered a dedicated and loyal fanbase, life behind the cameras was anything but harmonious. For Shatner, stepping into the role of command signified far more than merely leading the fictional crew of the Enterprise. It also necessitated navigating real-world rivalries that perpetually threatened to tear the close-knit cast apart. Fights, feuds, and deliberate sabotage. While audiences witnessed unwavering teamwork on screen, the stark reality behind the Star Trek set was frequently chaotic. William Shatner's unbridled ambition, his consistent propensity for rewriting scripts, and his unwavering determination to monopolize the spotlight generated intense friction that occasionally erupted into overt conflict. What devoted fans never comprehended at the time was that the on-screen camaraderie and friendships were severely strained by palpable jealousy and simmering resentment, often just mere feet away from the rolling cameras. An early and significant flashpoint occurred during the filming of The Man Trap in September 1966. Leonard Nimoy, whose character Spock was experiencing an unexpected surge in popularity, found himself in direct opposition to Shatner. Convinced that Nimoy was deliberately stealing attention, Shatner intentionally walked into Nimoy's shots, not just once, but an astonishing 17 times, thereby necessitating costly and time-consuming retakes. The exasperated director was furious, and Nimoy, deeply frustrated, threatened to abandon the set if Shatner's disruptive behavior persisted. This incident marked one of the initial, visible cracks in the meticulously crafted illusion of cast unity. Clashes were not confined solely to petty professional rivalries. In March 1968, during the intricate shoot of The Paradise Syndrome, Shatner and Nimoy engaged in a fiery argument regarding the appropriate portrayal of Captain Kirk's amnesia. Shatner vehemently advocated for intense drama and raw emotion, while Nimoy argued for a more nuanced and subtle approach. The tense standoff halted production for several hours, until the show's creator, Gene Roddenberry, was compelled to intervene and calm both men. Writers, too, experienced profound frustration. During the production of The Trouble with Tribbles in 1967, Shatner and Nimoy dedicated 14 consecutive hours to rewriting dialogue, a process that inadvertently led to significant cuts in other characters' lines. By the third tumultuous season, cast members half-jokingly referred to the program as the Shatner-Nimoy Show, a testament to their perceived dominance. Even groundbreaking and historically significant moments were not immune to underlying tension. In the 1968 episode, Plato's Stepchildren, the script boldly called for an interracial kiss between Shatner's Kirk and Nichelle Nichols's Uhura, a remarkably audacious decision for American television at the time. Shatner reportedly harbored concerns about potential audience backlash and requested an alternative version without the kiss. Nichols, however, firmly believed in the scene's profound importance and strategically collaborated with Shatner to deliberately sabotage every non-kiss take, thereby compelling the studio to broadcast the historic, groundbreaking moment. Beyond these creative and personal battles, the relentlessly grueling production schedule further exacerbated existing tensions. Episodes sometimes demanded 16 to 22 hours of continuous filming, leaving both cast and crew utterly exhausted and frayed. In October 1968, during the demanding shoot of the Tholian Web, Shatner himself experienced a complete breakdown after 18 grueling hours on set, defiantly throwing his script in a fit of frustration and refusing to continue until he was granted a much-needed rest. Even the commanding captain of the Enterprise could not escape the crushing, relentless demands of the show. The personal cost at home. While William Shatner confidently commanded the bridge of the Enterprise, his personal life was simultaneously spiraling into disarray. The relentless, grueling hours spent on set did not merely tax his physical endurance and strain his relationships with fellow actors, they fundamentally tore apart his family. Shatner's first marriage to Canadian actress Gloria Rand, initiated in 1956, had begun with considerable hope and a sense of stability. Together they welcomed 3 daughters, Leslie in 1958, Elizabeth in 1961, and Melanie in 1964. However, by the late 1960s, the overwhelming pressures of Star Trek left scant room for either committed fatherhood or a thriving marriage. The production schedule proved merciless. Shatner would routinely depart from home before dawn for makeup and often return long after midnight. He later confessed that between 1966 and 1969, he tragically missed 207 family dinners. On Christmas Day in 1967, while most families gathered around festive trees and shared gifts, he was inexorably on set, filming reshoots for The Gamesters of Triskelion. On April 12, 1968, he regrettably missed his daughter Elizabeth's school play because he was ensnared in yet another protracted script rewriting session with Leonard Nimoy. His pervasive absence inexorably became the norm rather than the rare exception. Gloria's patience steadily eroded with each painfully missed milestone. Birthdays passed without his presence. Holidays remained uncelebrated. And even simple, shared weekends together became an impossible dream. Shatner himself admitted in a revealing 2018 interview that the profound guilt of those years still weighed heavily upon him. In June 1969, mere weeks after Star Trek's cancellation, Gloria formally filed for divorce. She cited his incessant absences and emotional detachment, explaining that she felt as though she was raising their children entirely on her own. The timing was exceptionally cruel. At the very moment his family life dramatically collapsed, so too did his professional career. Shatner had tragically sacrificed his home life for a defining role that, at that juncture, no longer even existed. Instead of returning to a stable and comforting household, he faced an empty residence and 3 daughters living with their mother in Beverly Hills. His subsequent attempts to reconnect often fell short, and although he eventually fostered closer bonds with his children in later years, those lost weekends, 47 in total, he painstakingly calculated, became painful, indelible reminders of the steep cost of fame. The man who had ascended to a cultural symbol of unwavering leadership and formidable strength was, in reality, a husband and father silently watching the most integral parts of his life irrevocably slip away. And as the cameras finally stopped rolling, the true, arduous struggle for personal survival was only just commencing. From destitution to ultimate resurgence. When Star Trek concluded its run in 1969 after a mere 3 seasons, William Shatner's life almost entirely collapsed overnight. The show had cultivated a small yet intensely loyal following. Yet, this modest fan base proved insufficient to sustain its longevity. Once the series was officially cancelled, Shatner confronted a predicament distressingly familiar to countless actors: typecasting. He was no longer perceived as a versatile and adaptable performer. To casting agents, he was unequivocally Captain Kirk, and exclusively Captain Kirk. In the nascent years of the 1970s, acting opportunities became exceedingly scarce. The man once optimistically heralded as the next Marlon Brando was now reduced to accepting whatever roles he could secure, often appearing in low-budget horror or exploitation films such as Big Bad Mama, The Devil's Reign, and Kingdom of the Spiders. These roles did not foster his career progression, they merely covered his essential bills, and only just barely. With his daughters residing with Gloria in Beverly Hills, Shatner found himself desperately struggling to make ends meet. At one particularly bleak juncture, he was so financially depleted that he resorted to living out of a camper vehicle, discreetly parked in the San Fernando Valley. He later referred to this agonizing period simply as that period, too painful and raw to describe in explicit detail. To scrape by, he would accept appearances at minor parties or insignificant events, even resorting to wrapping up old personal possessions, such as his original Star Trek phaser, to present as Christmas gifts to his daughters, because he could not afford to purchase new presents. The profound humiliation of those financially destitute years remained deeply embedded within him for decades. Everything dramatically shifted in 1977 when Star Wars exploded onto cinema screens, utterly transforming the landscape of popular culture. Paramount Pictures swiftly realized it possessed its own valuable spacefaring property, ripe for a grand revival. By 1979, Star Trek: The Motion Picture premiered with an colossal $35 million budget, establishing it as one of the most expensive films ever produced at that time. At 48 years old, a determined Shatner returned to his iconic role as Captain Kirk, noticeably leaner due to a rigorous dieting regimen, resolutely determined to reclaim and re-establish his career. The film ultimately garnered $139 million worldwide, not an unparalleled blockbuster success, but undeniably sufficient to prove that considerable life still existed within the venerable franchise. True and undeniable redemption, however, arrived with Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan in 1982. Its leaner budget inadvertently necessitated a much stronger, more focused narrative, and Shatner's portrayal of Kirk, now older, wiser, and more emotionally vulnerable, resonated profoundly with both critics and audiences. Critics universally praised his nuanced performance, and suddenly, the man who had been experiencing homelessness just a few short years prior was once again confidently at the helm of a colossal cultural juggernaut. Reflection, regret, and enduring resilience. By the mid-1980s, William Shatner had meticulously reconstructed his professional reputation, not solely through the continuing success of the Star Trek films, but also via a new and impactful television role in T.J. Hooker. As Sergeant Thomas Jefferson Hooker, he once again embodied a commanding and authoritative figure, this time navigating the gritty streets instead of the vast expanse of space. The series consistently garnered solid ratings and effectively reminded audiences that Shatner possessed the undeniable capability to convincingly portray more than a single iconic role. Off-camera, he pushed himself relentlessly, frequently performing his own demanding stunts. These intense physical demands left him with broken ribs, multiple concussions, and the insidious beginnings of chronic back pain that would plague him well into his old age. Yet, even as he steadfastly propelled his career forward, Star Trek remained both his greatest salvation and his ever-present shadow. The lingering resentment among certain cast members never entirely dissipated. George Takei, James Doohan, and others frequently spoke publicly about Shatner's perceived domineering and self-centered behavior. While Shatner himself later admitted that deep-seated insecurity had fueled some of his controversial choices, the complex tension between him and Leonard Nimoy remained profoundly intricate. They collaborated, fiercely argued, and at times completely ceased speaking to one another. By the time Nimoy tragically passed away in 2015, the two were regrettably estranged, a profound loss Shatner subsequently described as one of the deepest regrets of his entire life. His later, highly acclaimed success on Boston Legal from 2004 to 2008 afforded him a revitalized identity outside the confines of science fiction. As the eccentric and brilliant Denny Crane, he masterfully blended sharp comedy with poignant tragedy, earning 2 prestigious Emmy Awards for his efforts. But by then, the cumulative physical toll of his demanding career was undeniable. Significant hearing loss, a consequence of years spent on noisy sets, severe arthritis, and persistent chronic back pain, became an inescapable part of his daily reality. In revealing interviews, he candidly admitted that the profound fear of loneliness, more so than physical pain, was what weighed most heavily upon him. Now, in his 90s, Shatner has spoken with rare and profound honesty about the unvarnished truth of what truly transpired on the Star Trek set. He openly acknowledges the deliberate sabotage, the intense fights, and the ego-driven battles, admitting they largely stemmed from his own relentless drive to remain firmly in the spotlight. "I failed sometimes," he stated plainly and unequivocally. "But I was always trying to keep the show alive." The fearless Captain Kirk, who once symbolized the very best of humanity, was, behind the cameras, a man desperately struggling to meticulously balance overwhelming ambition, gnawing insecurity, and the crushing, relentless demands of celebrity. It is this profound complexity, the unwavering hero on screen, the deeply flawed human being off it, that has finally been revealed to the public. William Shatner's extraordinary journey unequivocally proves that even the most enduring legends carry indelible scars. The man who so powerfully embodied courage and exemplary leadership was also profoundly vulnerable to fear, bitter rivalry, and deep-seated regret. Now at 93, his remarkable candor allows devoted fans to perceive not merely Captain Kirk, but the nuanced man behind the iconic uniform, a man who ultimately paid an extraordinarily heavy price for the defining role that indelibly shaped his entire existence. Do you believe William Shatner was unfairly criticized by his fellow castmates, or do you think his unbridled ambition genuinely cast him as the antagonist on the Star Trek set? Please share your considered thoughts in the comments section below, and do not forget to like and subscribe for more compelling stories about the often untold struggles of beloved Hollywood icons.